which was where we can really nail the Chinese, because there's literally thousands of communist Chinese here on student visas picking up drug money all over America every day.
And we do absolutely nothing about it.
This is the U.S. intelligence agency, Mind Control.
These pills in Mexico mostly, and they're making them look like they're real oxycodone, like they're real hydrocodone, Percocet, Adderall, and then they're bringing them, flooding them into the United States and falsely advertise them, marketing them as though they were real pharmaceuticals.
Tonight, yet another reason to treat the Mexican cartels like terrorist groups. They are, as we said, de facto state actors who partner with the Chinese to poison America. Last year, fentanyl overdoses killed 100,000 people. New research shows how Mexican cartels mass produce fentanyl with chemicals that are sourced in China, then distribute the pills in the United States. Throughout the United States, many times the fentanyl-laced pills are in counterfeit drugs, as you just heard, like oxycodone or Aleve, and then smuggled into the United States. Just this past weekend, more than 1 million pills, along with cocaine and heroin, were seized from a semi-truck in the port of entry in Arizona. One vehicle, one port of entry, one weekend. The cartels operate with impunity in Mexico, and the Chinese love to exploit that. Joining us now, David Asher, former senior
is that true?
official. David,
He said the cartels operate with impunity. Do you remember when we were just watching a fucking gunship mow those guys down?
Yeah, impunity. All right, man. No worries. Yeah. We'll just take your word for it, shall we?
The thing is
even though it's actively not true.
The thing is that it's one thing if it was the Chinese state doing it, but these are like chemical manufacturers. I mean, you saw Breaking Bad. Wasn't at one point the chemical manufacturer in on it, right?
Yes.
Isn't that a plot point?
Maybe. I'm not 100% sure.
Like, God,
Just
no.
because someone holds sway and power doesn't mean they're operating with impunity.
Yeah. But I think
so
when they go work for Gus, he is able to source the chemicals. Like, he has a front for like a chemical company.
Yeah,
It's
but
like,
he's not the chemical person. He's just the one getting it.
Yeah. He just works with. I think he probably works with Chinese. If Breaking Bad is accurate, I don't know. But the chemicals can be produced in China and then they're like brought over, and like as far as the company's concerned, it doesn't matter what you're doing with their chemicals. They're just selling you chemicals. Like, anyone can sell these chemicals. But they're making it sound like, you know, Xi Jinping is out here injecting our kids.
we've been saying now for months that we need to declare the cartels terrorist organizations because they act like it. They're narco states. They own northern Mexico. It seems as though they now have their own State Department that partners with the Chinese in this criminal activity.
Yeah, I mean, extremely organized crime. That's all I can say. I've worked on some of the biggest criminal cases.
I just want to say, is it organized? I hate to interrupt you, but
organized with the.
Aren't these people? Are these the ones going out of business or went out of business?
Who?
News
David
Nation.
Asher? I don't think so.
News Nation. I don't know.
I don't know. I thought they were a subsidiary of some bigger company.
Oh, I don't know. I think they were one of the things that got canceled because nobody watches them.
The government of China, though, you've got to understand that none of this could work without the Chinese government's involvement. That's so we're not just dealing with drug cartels and Chinese triad, which are the version of cartels in China. We're dealing with the Chinese Ministry of State Security, the United Front Department of the Communist Party. They are organizing both the fentanyl
There
shipments.
it is, the rainbow fentanyl. That's what's going to get your kids.
Is that the narrative? Is it?
Yeah, that's what they always show for the rainbow fentanyl.
To Mexico. At some level, they're involved in the manufacturing and doing it with the goal of killing American kids. And they're doing a pretty good job at that from their perspective.
The goal is making
and
money.
Then they're having Chinese students in the U.S. pick up the money, which was where we can really nail the Chinese, because there's literally thousands of communist Chinese here on student visas picking up drug money all over America every day.
And we do absolutely nothing about it.
What do you think about what he just said?
He's not wrong, but fuck off.
Oh, come on.
Okay.
I mean, look, there's definitely
he's
people
claiming-
here, and they're definitely
Hang on,
students.
let
He's-
me hear what Ace
he's
says.
making a pretty crazy claim that like fucking the Chinese government is working with these chemical companies to intentionally poison American kids. The first thing we need to establish is that there likely is not much of a motive here other than making money. The second thing is China's like capitalism is more laissez-faire than ours. It's more so neglect on the Chinese government's part. They more so do not care that these chemicals are being produced and sold to Mexican cartels. It's not that they're collaborating with anyone; it's that they just don't give a shit.
And then the
And-
whole part where he's
and-
talking about students are making money off the
As far
drugs.
as students go, okay, so your average Chinese kid here on a student visa probably isn't making any money off of this, but it wouldn't shock me, someone runs this chemical company and that someone is someone's dad, you know what I mean, or uncle or whatever. So it wouldn't shock me if it's like you've got people here in the US who have, familial connections to those companies who are
I mean, yeah,
doing
if-
some
if-
low-level organizing for them here in the U.S. But to
I mean,
treat
most
every
of the
student
time,
real quick, to treat every Chinese student here with suspicion is kind of fucked.
yeah, and that's the point that really needs to be made here. Like there is a lot of the students that come here are well off. Like you're not going to get peasants from the middle of the country going to universities in Australia and America, right? That's not going to happen. So these people are generally well off. Whether they're involved or not is kind of like no. The general answer is no. But
Yeah, not everybody
they
makes their
exist.
fortune selling chemicals. You know what I mean?
yeah, like the implication that every Chinese student is doing this is dumb, and it's no different to the Japanese internment attitudes of World War II, right? That's literally the attitude that we're seeing here.
What about the Chinese Exclusion Act?
what's that?
Oh, it's way more racist than the internment camps. It was called the Chinese Exclusion Act, but at the time they didn't know what a Chinese was, so it was just all
Okay.
Asians can't come.
Oh, that's great.
It was literally, it would be
That's
like the
terrific.
Muslim ban, except it was on Asians.
When did this happen?
Oh, before the fucking internment camps, man. Like this is back in the like genocide era, and like railroad building. 'Cause,
Oh, like the gold times.
yeah, like the gold
Yeah.
times.
both Canada and the U.S. like had policies like this.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Australia did too, to be completely honest. Because that was a whole thing as well. Like the Chinese would come here for gold mining. That's like a thing. Like historically, I just don't know what the attitudes were. I imagine it wasn't great.
I was just thinking about how racist it would be, and I'm just picturing like some guy with like a device to measure people's eyes. Because like how they do like skull science and shit.
Which I guess should be surprising, but maybe it's not.
I was surprised, frankly. Even in the Trump administration, we tried to make an effort, but a lot of the Justice Department staff felt that this was somehow.
I wonder why those efforts failed. It's probably because you don't actually have a concerted idea of what the fuck you're even like trying to target here. Like I think
It's a hysterical reaction.
Yeah, I'd like to think, and maybe I'm just being naive, but I'd like to think if we had people like in power who were like, listen, clearly we have a problem with these chemical plants. If the DEA can just source where, these cartels and whatnot, which chemical companies they're in contact with to make this fentanyl or whatever other criminal organizations are making it, if we can just source it back to these chemical factories in China that everyone's talking about, and then we have names and addresses of these chemical factories and evidence to show that they're creating these chemicals, do you think it would be like an unreasonable request to tell China like, hey,
Well,
you mind shutting these down for us?
Here's the thing: is that I could literally look up a Chinese bulk chemical company right now and call them on the phone and start talking about getting chemicals. It's just free market. So it's technically not the seller's fault what the chemicals are used for at the end of the day.
that's the other thing, because like you can order like research chemicals to get high into your house online. There's entire like internet forums about this stuff, about people who are like, yeah, they didn't have to access the dark web or anything. They just went to like a website that sells certain chemicals that are hallucinogenic, and they have them shipped to their house, and they say it's for like science shit. I don't know what they say it's for, if anyone even notices, but they just take them. Like, this is not a hard thing to do. We have a lot of these companies ourselves in the U.S. I don't know. You bring up a good point there. It's like these companies could easily just claim like, hey, we didn't know people were using this shit to make drugs,
Hmm.
which they might, they might not. I mean, maybe they do, but at the same time, it's like, is that like worthy of perjury? I'm sure there's like these companies also make like legitimate sales off of these chemicals.
Hmm.
I mean, we
I,
can
I think
keep
Breaking Bad really depicts it really well because they
we
show
can
like the
we can
chemical
keep
lady cutting them a deal and knowing what's going on.
we can keep going with this. Y'all see that viral video of what appears to be a factory in China where the guys like where they're all testing the vapes, the disposable vapes?
No.
It's just these guys. They're just like
I don't
taking
think they were
hits.
testing it. I think they were just hitting them as they were going before
Well,
boxing them up.
whatever they were doing, right? It's just these videos of these guys ripping these disposable vapes, these Elf bars, which are super popular in the U.S. And like, you go to any college campus in the U.S., like half the kids are using them. It kind of just confirms what everybody's like had suspicions, quote unquote, about when it came to these like disposable vapes that hit the market once Juul was kind of like regulated out of business, is that they were made in these like sketchy Chinese factories, and they're actually like less safe than Juul or whatever vape juice or whatever it
I
was.
mean, that's a classic government reaction because during Prohibition, when we were still using ethanol fuel, they started putting poison in there, and that's what was making people go blind from bathtub gin and shit.
It's a hard question to answer. Okay, how do we stop this? Because it's like the system that's set up. There's not really a way to stop it
No,
unless you want to
and
like crack down on people, and you
that's
want to
not going to
crack down on
work.
these. You want to
It's
crack down on these companies, and fine, but you should know what that could lead to.
you have to also you have to consider supply and demand inside the whole thing. If you crack down on them, it's just going to raise the amount that they can sell.
Right,
They're going to
and
make their profit regardless of crackdowns. But it's
exactly, and this actually, if anything, because we know,
well,
for
that's
example,
their solution is declare them terrorists.
well, that's a horrible solution, but the thing that I wanted to get to, based on what you just said, with like they could increase their prices and their supply, is, for example, we know that in Afghanistan, the Taliban will say like, "Oh, we're
Hmm.
not selling opium anymore." That's
Hmm.
done. Like when they took over, they were like, "We're not selling opium anymore." They're still selling opium, but they say that to fuck with the market and create this like false idea of how much Afghan opium would be worth, so they could sell it for higher prices. So what would likely happen if you shut down these factories is, if you shut them down, then there's other companies that could come from literally anywhere, by the way. They could come from the Balkans. They could come from
Mm.
Lebanon. They could come from Colombia. They could come from anywhere that has like someone with money and the means to open up these companies to sell like arguably a worse product for an elevated price. They could be like, well, all these factories, or even other parts of China, you know, they could be like, well, the big company in, I don't know, like Shenzhen shut down. We're here in Guangdong or whatever.
You'd have to
We can,
do a lot to prove it.
yeah. But it's the point is the price would just increase, and you would
Uh,
ultimately quickly and readily sponsor another like factory to make more money, and in turn, gangs and cartels make more money because they can sell it for more, because they ultimately have to spend more to get it.
ultimately, the solution is
Declare them terrorists. He's got a solution. Why don't we listen to my man right here?
no, but like if we really want to solve this, the solution is, I mean, if we're talking about vapes, it's regulating imported ones and producing domestic ones that are regulated and made sure that they're safe. Or, in the event of drugs, legalizing or decriminalizing, whatever's more preferred at the time, I guess.
Yeah, and
That's the
whole
solution, because once
this
it's deregulated, once it's decriminalized, people theoretically aren't going to purely, everything should become cheaper because everything is more accessible because it's legal, right? That's
well,
the idea.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily, because then you have more control over the market. Actually, a lot of times, like people, for example, marijuana. A lot of people still buy it like straight from like underground sources
Because
because
of taxes.
yeah, the shops also they're so much more expensive and stuff. The
well,
big thing
this
is like the
this
gummy
this was
diversity. That's where they're
this was
really making their money.
perfectly
Yeah.
this was perfectly, and what you just said about weed was reminder. These numbers are from like a couple years ago, so they might not be entirely accurate right now. But this is perfectly exemplified in Canada with weed, right? They legalize weed because they want to make like a tax profit, obviously, and just because it makes sense. Like it makes sense to make weed legal. Everybody smokes it. It's not a big deal. At one point in time, like about a year or so, maybe 2 years after they legalized it, there were certain reports and investigations that found that 50% of weed in Canada was still being bought like quote unquote underground. So basically,
Yep.
you call the weed man, like you call the plug, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just because like certain people couldn't afford to go and spend like 40-50 bucks on
But
the fucking
decriminalization is a better option than legalization.
Also, a lot of times
vanilla
the
ice cream
dealer
OG.
comes to you.
Exactly. That's the other thing.
Yeah, decriminalization is the solution, not legalization, because legalization implies that the government gets a cut. So just decriminalize it, people can sell it, whatever, and then deal with the consequences later. Just weed and
All right, I'm
psychedelics,
gonna
right?
hit play.
There, go for it.
How racist or certainly not AG Barr didn't think that, but I mean, the Chinese understand our unwillingness to enforce like criminal statutes against students who think they're just picking up money. So they say this being smuggled out of China by their parents so they can invest in U.S. real estate. When
This graphic is wild. Treating cartels like terrorists, increased criminal prosecutions. I don't know about you, but I don't know how many terrorists we arrest and prosecute.
I'm gonna say not many.
Not many. Reduce human smuggling.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, people don't seem to realize is like when people get to the border, it's not just cartels doing the human smuggling. Like this is like
Yeah,
kind of
they're
a global
coyotes.
truth.
They're independent. Juarez is
It's
fucked up, but
like if you're it's anyone with a car or a truck, basically. Like
but this
maybe
part, the sanctions, you can already do that.
some people are using company trucks. Well, that's the other thing too with this whole like treating. And you could go into this for a ton of organizations, not just the cartels. But
This is
the
misleading people,
cartels.
though.
Well, no. And I'm getting into that, but the thing with the cartels is like this is such an old way of thinking. The cartels are more so a political entity these days than anything. I think like people always have this kind of like noble idea that we're gonna go in there and we're gonna eliminate the cartels, guns a blazing and shit, and that's not how this works. You would probably get more
That's what people
by
want to do.
engaging with them diplomatically, as crazy as that sounds. But at this point, they're basically just they're fucking political entities. They're very well organized. You can't treat them like a street gang.
That's why you
That's why
use helicopter gunships to kill them.
that's why people are willing to sit down and talk to like the Taliban, because it's like terrorist group or not, they're a political entity.
Yeah, I think the cartels is, at the end of the day, the cartels point to influence politics is to make money.
Look, and this
So
is
it's not political goals like a terrorist group has.
Another thing that's coming in is like you look at the normalization between the Arab states and Syria right now. I believe it was today Jordan like airstriked a Captagon factory. For those of you who don't know, Captagon.
Oh yeah,
basically
I
like
brought that
speed,
up the other day too.
right? And the reason they're able to do this is because there are currently negotiations in process in which the Gulf will pay out a certain amount of money to Syria, the Syrian government, so like the Assad government, which is basically aid or whatever you want to call it, to tell him to like, hey, we know that your brother has very deep connections. Like he is the first in command when it comes to these Captagon operations. Captagon being like an amphetamine like drug for anyone who doesn't know, which is sold by the billions in the Middle East and the Gulf, right? And is managed by the Assad regime. They're paying him absurd amounts of money just to be like, stop this shit from coming into our country, shut down all the factories you have making this right now. You know?
Yeah, that's another
So-
solution, is paying them instead of taking their money. But I think all of this right here, all of this on screen can be done without declaring them a terrorist organization, because they're not terrorists. All of this can already be done. They're misleading their audience into like basically just getting into a war with Mexico
Yes.
for some reason.
That's the entire purpose of the conservative media.
And it's like,
When in
that's
fact,
the thing.
that-
What I think I should have rephrased when I said like they're a political entity. Like you need to deal with them diplomatically. You need to sit down and talk.
Yeah.
Like that's
Depending.
Yeah, you know, obviously depending on certain factors. Yeah.
money's being taken from China. They're buying the fentanyl precursor chemicals, shipping to Mexico, and then the Chinese are taking their take in the United States to buy real estate on the back end. So it's all illegal money from that
Unbelievable.
perspective.
Well, and the,
Yeah,
the
it's
other thing
incredible.
is that if you get the money on the back end in the United States, you don't have to worry about
Look
smuggling
at
the
this
money
Tucker
back
Carlson weasel
into
wannabe.
Mexico. It launders itself essentially, rather than having
It
Look at the
launders
loser.
itself, and they do send money back to Mexico for the Chinese cartels through Chinese banks operating in the U.S. So I hate to say it, it's sort of China.
Yeah,
You got
well,
Chinese banks, Chinese students,
You don't
Chinese
hate
money
it.
brokers, and then Chinese chemical companies that are in bed with the biggest cartels in the world, Jalisco, Sinaloa, to manufacture a drug that is a murder weapon. And
Yeah,
you
with
talk
Fred-
about that.
with
What's
friends
the
like
bet the
these, you
only
lose enemies.
cartel he knows is the
We've
Sinaloa
talked about that.
cartel?
Since you worked at the State Department, I want to get you on this. We've been talking about
That's the cartel that most people know, because that's the famous one. It's not even the most powerful one.
No, I know,
And,
and
like-
this is what I'm saying is that that's the only cartel that he knows about.
And then there's like specific cartels that are really small, but because of where they're located, they're really powerful. Like Juarez is like only in control of Juarez, but like they're extremely powerful because they control a border checkpoint. And like Juarez is like the place that's bad to go. There is a lot of cartel power in Juarez, but they're like measly compared to the next generation cartel.
all the way back since May. Why not declare the cartels terrorist organizations? It opens up a whole slew of laws that you can go after them. We've gone as far as talking about using drone strikes on the Sinaloa leadership and some of the
Jesus
other cartel
fucking
leadership
Christ.
in northern Mexico. They act as de facto narco states. They control northern Mexico way more than the Mexican government does. I've yet to be able to get a straight answer from anybody in power, but since you used to be at the State Department, what is the aversion to calling the Mexican cartels what they are?
I don't know if there really should be one. I mean, I worked on some of the biggest terrorist cases in history, and led the Operation Cassandra against Hezbollah, which was trafficking drugs with members of the Sinaloa drug cartel. By the way, we made them a narco-terrorist organization, not just a terrorist organization. Their partners in Mexico, specifically Sinaloa, Jalisco, and Los Zetas, all are terrorist organizations, and they're using the weapon
Okay, hit the
of
pause button.
fentanyl laced.
That's because Hezbollah and the Sinaloa or the cartels in Mexico have very different origins and motives, right? The cartels in Mexico originated as drug cartels versus Hezbollah, which originated as like a political militant group and then later branched out into drug trafficking and things like that.
How did they
because
form?
They needed to fund their
It has to
terrorist
do with the
activities.
war with Israel, and also,
I had a feeling it was.
yeah, it has to do with that whole. Lebanon is really fucking complicated.
Mm.
We need a whole episode to do that, but just know that,
Well, we have a Lebanon person.
Well, we've got one. We just asked
we could,
Marion.
we could,
Yeah,
we could
that's what I
talk
mean.
about it again, is what I'm saying. But my point
Mm.
is, one originated with the specific intent to be a cartel, a drug cartel. The other originated as a political movement that has turned to drugs because of their circumstances in order to like continue funding their activities. So it's like you need to that's why I don't like the way these people present things, because he's saying like, well, he's like saying all frantically like, well, Hezbollah is working with the cartels, and whatever 56-year-old boomer listening to this is gonna hear is like, they're gonna hear like Islamic terrorists like working with the cartels, oh my god, it's the axis of evil, when in reality it's just like it's a thing that's come out of necessity for them. It's not like, it's fucked up, don't get me wrong, but it's not as sinister as you think. It's just, when you analyze the motives, it's kind of like, okay, they're involved in drug trafficking now because they need more money.
Well, I mean, you look at the recent where they apologized and handed over the people who were responsible for killing those people, American citizens. And like, even I framed it as like, oh, they're scared of America because, that's going to get more clicks. But that wasn't the reason why they handed over those people immediately to America.
That's the other thing in general, is it's like, even if you look at Hezbollah, it's like they really have no interest in pissing the US off. They don't.
Mm-hmm.
They don't, like, they're trying to like Elmer Fudd this shit. They're trying to be like, shh, be very quiet, I'm hunting rabbits. Like, they don't want the US to
Speaking of
suddenly show
Elmer
interest
Fudd,
in them again.
Israel.
yeah, they don't want the US down their throats again. You know what I mean? Like, the problem is he's just saying Hezbollah and the cartels are working together without any context.
Because these people
Like,
are all just buzzwords.
You need to explain why that's happening and how we got there.
yeah.
And the whole reason we even
I mean,
know
I
this is happening.
I say it all the time. I've said it. Also they work with Wagner.
And again, the reason we know that is because a DEA agent in like 2006 or 2008 intercepted a call, and I want to say Colombia, and he found, and on the call people were speaking Arabic, so he was just mad confused, and then he looked into it and he found out, oh, okay, like Hezbollah is now involved in the drug trade. That's just fucking awesome. Yeah, it's just this media. Who is this? Who are we watching right now? Like, what is this outlet?
This is News Nation. It's like shitty Fox News.
Yeah, I was about to say, this whole thing is a shit show.
Their partners in Mexico, specifically Sinaloa, Jalisco, and Los Zetas, all are terrorist organizations, and they're using the weapon of fentanyl, laced into everything from counterfeit oxycodone to Aleve pills, to murder people. I mean, way too many people die from this drug for it to be a normal drug from a drug trafficking standpoint. You don't want 1-2% of your clientele to die every year. Okay, their business model doesn't make any sense unless part of it's being underwritten by the Chinese government.
Okay, tell that to the tobacco companies, Dillhole.
Itself, and the Mexican government's in bed with them.
Wow.
I think by designating them terrorists, we're going to be able to draw attention to the fact that
we
all
would.
tools against them.
Yeah, no, we
I don't
would
have
be
any
able to do all
problem
that. We
using notes.
just
We can
don't.
use
Hey,
military-
David, I hate to do this. I'm up against the computer, which will cut you off. It's more polite when I do it than when the computer does it. It's good to see you. We'll have you back.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. We'll be right back.
That was a terrible cut. Also, learn how to tie a tie, you douche.
What percentage of their fucking consumer base do you think like heroin has killed, or just any opiate in general?
Oh, that's the thing is a lot of old people get hooked on opiates because of the doctors. The doctors will prescribe them, and
Yeah, so clearly the pharmaceutical companies don't want to make money because they kill like a small percentage of their client base. Yeah, it's not like we're gonna run out of addicts or something.
so I mean, I just want to look at there's other clips like this, but just like. Does this look like that they have absolute impunity to me? Because this is the Mexican military versus the cartels. Let's see what's going on here.
La torreta del helicóptero. De la torreta, ya empecé a disparar la torreta. Disparó hacia abajo.